When we hear the term skewed data, most of us immediately think of graphs, averages, and outliers. We picture numbers pulled to one side of a distribution, giving a misleading sense of what is typical or normal. But what if I told you that in education, data is just as often skewed, not by numbers, but by human behaviors, classroom routines, and well-intentioned inconsistencies in teaching practices? Consider a middle school mathematics department. Across 6 classrooms, the same standardized test is administered. On the surface, we might assume the results are comparable. Yet, a closer look reveals subtle, human-driven factors that make these scores anything but uniform. In the first classroom, a student raises a hand during a test, hoping for clarification. The teacher responds firmly, "Sorry, I can't help you at all," adhering to a policy aimed at ensuring a true measure of each student's understanding. In another room, a different teacher has developed a habit, perhaps unconsciously, of giving little hints when a student approaches their desk during testing. Over time, students in this classroom may perform better, not necessarily because they understand the content more deeply, but because they receive micro-assistance that isn't reflected anywhere in the data. Meanwhile, a third teacher grades multi-point questions more leniently, allowing students to retain partial credit even when parts of the solution are incorrect. A fourth teacher offers retests, giving students a second chance to demonstrate mastery. In a fifth classroom, the teacher grants an extra half period for test completion, effectively reducing time pressure and potentially improving performance. Finally, a sixth teacher provides accommodations, such as reading the test aloud, not just to those students for whom it is intended, but to the entire class, leveling the playing field in one sense, but subtly inflating scores in another. Before we move on, let's introduce 2 more classrooms. Classrooms 7 and 8 offer study guides and go over them the day before the test. This is yet another variable. Even these 2 classrooms can skew the data among each other. One study guide focuses on conceptual understanding, while Classroom 8 gives the same exact questions with only changing names and numbers within the practice problems, and therefore almost mirrors the test. Even seemingly benign classroom interventions, like study guides or review sessions, can skew data in ways that AI systems misinterpret. Consider 2 classrooms preparing students differently. One emphasizes conceptual understanding, while another mirrors the test with minor adjustments. An AI analyzing test performance might conclude that students in the second classroom are more proficient, interpreting higher scores as evidence of mastery rather than a reflection of preparation strategy. Similarly, AI-driven feedback might suggest targeted interventions for students in one classroom while leaving others unaddressed, misled by these preparatory differences. This mirrors the challenges we see with human grading, variability, hints, or retesting. Small differences in support and structure create patterns that look like ability differences in the data, even when the underlying student knowledge is similar. Individually, each of these actions might seem small, insignificant, or even supportive. But collectively, they introduce variability that data analysts would recognize as skewed. The patterns in the results are influenced not only by student ability, but by human decisions, classroom management choices, and teaching style. Importantly, these distortions are rarely intentional. Teachers are not manipulating data. They are responding to the moment, to student needs, and to practical realities of teaching. Yet the result is the same. The data does not represent a uniform, controlled environment, and interpreting it without context can be misleading. In many modern classrooms, teachers are increasingly relying on AI platforms to provide real-time feedback on student performance. These systems are designed to highlight trends, flag students who may need intervention, and suggest instructional adjustments. On the surface, this seems like an objective tool, removing the subjectivity of human judgment. Yet, the reality is more complex. An AI dashboard may highlight certain students as at risk based on historical patterns, nudging a teacher to focus attention there. Teachers may unconsciously respond to these signals, giving extra hints or support to flagged students while overlooking others who could benefit equally. In effect, the AI becomes a mediator of attention, subtly influencing classroom practice in ways that mirror the human micro-variations already described. Just as one teacher's small hint or lenient grading affects outcomes, AI recommendations can shape teacher behavior in ways that skew student results, even when both humans and machines are acting with the best intentions. The mechanisms of AI bias in education are often subtle but impactful. Consider an AI tutoring system that adjusts support based on predicted student ability. A student who performs average on practice exercises might receive hints more frequently, while a student predicted to be proficient could receive minimal guidance, even if they struggle with a particular concept. Similarly, automated grading algorithms may award partial credit more generously to answers that resemble patterns in the historical data they were trained on, while penalizing responses that diverge, regardless of their correctness. AI tools that recommend interventions or retesting can inadvertently reinforce existing inequities. Retest suggestions might target only certain groups or skill levels based on past trends, rather than the current student's actual need. Each of these behaviors mirrors the micro-level differences described in human classrooms: unintentional, context-driven, and capable of skewing data in ways that are not immediately visible. This raises a challenging question. When we critique artificial intelligence systems for potential bias or error, are we truly holding them to a higher standard than we hold ourselves? AI may make recommendations based on incomplete or imperfect data, and it may fail to account for nuance. In many ways, the human-driven variability in classrooms reflects the same kinds of biases and inconsistencies. A teacher's small, well-intentioned decisions, giving a hint, grading leniently, allowing retests, affect outcomes in ways that mirror the limitations we fear from AI. This raises a critical point. AI systems, much like human teachers, are not immune to bias, and their output can be skewed based on the data they are trained on or the way they are deployed. Consider an AI-powered platform designed to provide feedback on student performance in real time. If the underlying model was trained on historical data from schools with uneven grading practices, discrepancies in assessment, or selective accommodations, the AI may inadvertently perpetuate those same inequities. For example, a system might consistently flag students from certain demographic groups as at risk while underestimating the abilities of others, simply because the training data reflected human biases present in previous classrooms. In practical classroom use, these biases can manifest in ways that mirror the human scenarios described earlier. An AI tutor might offer more detailed hints to students who tend to perform close to average on practice exercises, while providing minimal support to those it predicts as already proficient, even if those students are struggling with specific concepts. Similarly, an AI grading system might consistently award partial credit for certain types of answers, while penalizing others, depending on patterns in the historical grading data it learned from. Teachers relying on such systems could receive reports suggesting that some students are outperforming others without realizing that the differences are less about understanding and more about how the AI distributes its support or interprets responses. Further, AI tools that provide feedback directly to teachers online can create an illusion of objectivity. Dashboards may rank students, highlight areas of weakness, or recommend interventions, but these outputs reflect patterns in the data and the assumptions built into the algorithms, not an absolute measure of student knowledge. For instance, a platform might suggest retesting only for students flagged as low performers, inadvertently excluding others who could benefit, or it might recommend reading tests aloud for all students based on historical intervention trends, rather than tailoring support individually. In these ways, AI can amplify systemic inequities in the classroom, subtly reshaping teacher perceptions and instructional decisions in ways that are analogous to the micro-level differences in human-teacher practice outlined earlier. Bias, once embedded in AI, can compound over time. A teacher who follows AI guidance week after week may begin to internalize its signals, gradually shaping instruction to fit the patterns suggested by the system. For example, if the AI consistently flags a subset of students as struggling, a teacher might provide them more detailed explanations or targeted support, while unknowingly reducing attention to others. Similarly, a grading AI trained on lenient scoring patterns may produce inflated scores, which in turn could influence the teacher's perception of classroom mastery. Over months and years, these small, well-intentioned interventions can accumulate, subtly affecting outcomes and altering student trajectories. The result is a feedback loop. AI amplifies human biases just as human microdecisions amplify each other, creating skewed results that are difficult to untangle. By examining these parallels, it becomes clear that AI does not eliminate bias. It redistributes it according to the patterns present in its training and operational design. The challenge, then, is not simply to implement AI, but to understand its limitations, scrutinize the data feeding it, and interpret its recommendations critically, just as we would need to do with the varied approaches of our human colleagues. It is also important to recognize the inherent limits of AI within classrooms. No matter how sophisticated the algorithms, AI cannot perceive nuance in the same way a human teacher does. It lacks awareness of emotional context, prior experiences, or specific moment-to-moment needs. For instance, an AI might recommend reading a test aloud for all students because historical data suggested benefits for some, ignoring the fact that only a few students actually require the accommodation. Likewise, predictive models may generalize patterns across diverse populations, missing individual strengths or challenges. Human judgment remains essential to interpret AI output and to make meaningful, context-sensitive decisions. The technology can highlight trends, flag potential concerns, or provide recommendations, but it cannot replace the nuanced insight that comes from years of classroom experience. Recognizing this limitation is critical to prevent over-reliance on AI outputs and to maintain equity in instruction. Recognizing this parallel is crucial. It does not absolve AI of responsibility, nor does it excuse poor data practices. Instead, it reframes the conversation. We must approach AI as a tool to assist decision-making, while acknowledging that human practice is inherently imperfect and context-dependent. If a machine is being evaluated for fairness or reliability, so too should our own practices. When we analyze test scores, performance metrics, or classroom data, we need to ask, how much of this variation reflects true student ability, and how much reflects the nuanced ways humans interact with students? Understanding these dynamics helps us become more thoughtful educators and more discerning consumers of educational data. It reminds us that skew is not always malicious, and error is not always neglect. Instead, both reflect the messy, complex realities of human systems. Realities that any AI must navigate and any human must reflect upon. In short, if AI is going to help us improve teaching and learning, it cannot replace judgment, it can only supplement it. And if we are not attentive to our own biases and routines, we risk misunderstanding both human and machine-assisted outcomes. The lesson is clear: data is never just numbers. Test scores, grades, and metrics are inseparable from the human context in which they were generated. By examining our own classroom practices, the small decisions, the varying accommodations, the hints, retests, and grading nuances, we gain insight into why data can be skewed and how our expectations for AI might reflect our own imperfect standards. Ultimately, it challenges us to approach both teaching and technology with humility, reflection, and a commitment to fairness.